welcome to the Alpha Movement Podcast. My name is Tom Foxley, and this is another episode in the Mindset Rx'd series. In the Mindset Rx'd series, I'm going to show you the building blocks of the champ's mindset and how to apply that to your sport, whether it's CrossFit or whatever. We'll be talking to the best coaches, athletes, and experts in the world to show you the steps to mastering your inner athlete. On today's show, I'm joined by Mr. Jason Phillips. He works with a lot of top performers in the CrossFit world as well as the general public. He's also been through a lot of personal struggles and challenges, as you will see. What I like about his approach is that it's so common sense. He doesn't force square pegs into round holes, but approaches nutrition with common sense, providing like a great balance between all the far-leaning thoughts of nutrition. Today we discuss the psychology of diet. How do we develop consistency in our diet? Why do people fall off track? What struggles do people typically come across? We also tackle some big subjects such as eating disorders. All in all, this is one of my favorite podcasts of recent times, and I'm sure you'll get loads of golden nuggets from Jason. So let's go on with the show. Welcome to the show.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm glad we connected.
So yeah, me too. So I always do an incredibly bad job of introducing people and giving them their due credit. So can you just give us a quick background on yourself?
Man, I might do a worse job of introducing myself than you might do. So I think that, and this, I always tell the same story. So anyone that's heard me on podcasts before, I apologize for the redundancy, but my entry into fitness is completely different than I think 99% of people in my position, right? That are trying to like lead in the space. When I was 18, I had an eating disorder and I was anorexic. I was 118 pounds. And so like I'm 5'10", so 5'10", 118 is not really a good look for a dude. I think most females outweigh me at that point. But, so it was a really gnarly, like downward spiral in my life at that time. And what brought me out of it and what saved me was learning proper nutrition and proper fitness. And, I knew right then and there, like this that just saved me is it's my job to now pay it forward to the world. And I, borderline like OCD with nutrition, like I wanted to learn everything there was about it. And I invested all my time. And I mean, even like right when I moved away to college, like I was helping my friends, like, in college, like with their nutrition. And I just knew it's what I wanted to do. And back in the day, like when the internet wasn't as popular, there weren't as many jobs, but fortunately we live in a age where technology is prevalent and leads us. And, now I'm in this position where I can help people out.
Do you mind me asking what the turning point was?
For me, like
getting
out of it. So it's really interesting. So around that time, like it caused a lot of like negative effects in my life. Like as you can imagine, like hormonally, mentally, like I definitely had clinical depression. It was a tough time. And the reality is I had such low hormone output that I couldn't really function after like 1 or 2 o'clock. And so I couldn't even hold a job. And so I got this job working at Gold's Gym. And so I was opening up Gold's Gym from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m., which is perfect, right? Because I had energy at that time of the day. And great, like I'm in this setting that, even though I was obsessed with like losing weight or like being lean, like I was in the setting I quote unquote enjoyed. And so being there, one of the trainers kind of saw what I was doing to myself. And there was this dude that would come in every day and I was like, man, I want to look like him. And he was like a bodybuilder and, he was like just getting ready for a show and he was like super lean, but super jacked. And I'm like, that's what I want to be. And she's like, yeah, well, I do his nutrition. And I was like, cool. Could you do mine? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. And for whatever reason, I put blind faith in her. And she said, you got to go home and you got to eat 4,000 calories, like vividly, like that was the number she gave me. And so I went home and this is like long before the days of MyFitnessPal. And I bought a calorie counting book and I made 4,000 calorie meal plans and I did it like every day. And 2 weeks later, I remember looking in the mirror and be like, damn, like I'm not fat. And it was that instant that I knew food would no longer negatively affect me. And so, for her, it was a bold-faced lie, but I'm forever grateful for her doing that. And, there were more learning pieces along the way and more trust to be gained. Because obviously those 4,000 calorie meal plans I was making were very clean food. But, like, let's say I wanted to have pizza. I was still very scared of like shitty foods. And so I had to learn to trust that even cheat foods would not negatively affect me. And so, it was an evolution over time. But like the immediate like switch that flipped was that moment.
Do you remember your self-talk at that time? Like what you'd say to yourself, especially that time when you're kind of putting together a 4,000 calorie meal plan?
I don't remember self-talk then as much as I vividly remember it when I was anorexic. And when I was anorexic, it was like, I was disgusted with myself. Like I actually, I've got a fucking weird, memory. And like I vividly remember myself driving at the time I worked at Best Buy, like the electronics store, and I had like eaten something that morning, and for whatever reason I thought there was too much fat in it, and I was like disgusted with myself. I'm like, can't believe you fucking ate that. Like you got to do extra cardio at the gym today. And like that's how I thought about everything. Like I remember going up to my room after meals and like doing crunches, thinking like I was losing my abs because I ate, right? Like it was super scary. It's weird. Like I don't know why I had so much trust in what this woman said, but I instantly put trust in it. And so when I was eating the 4,000 calories, like the people that were around me at the gym, they were supportive of it because they knew how bad I was fucking myself up. And so I think because there was so much support and because for whatever reason I trusted it was the right thing, it was actually very positive. Like it was oddly positive. And I know now from having worked with so many anorexics, like it was not normal. Like it was not the normal response.
Yeah, of course. Did you think, oh yeah, I want to definitely change now? Or was it, I don't really know what I'm doing, but someone in an authoritative figure is kind of suggesting this to me?
It was that. It was definitely like, I had this ideal picture in my head. And I think that to a degree, everybody does, right? Anyone that undertakes like a physical endeavor has this picture of themselves in their mind. And it literally could be the aesthetics or it could be their performance, but everyone has some ideal in their head, of what they are or where they should be. And so what I identified with was, well, I wanted to look this certain way. And, I would read like Muscle and Fitness and Muscle Mag and Iron Man and like, whatever magazines were like laying around the gym. And, because I wanted to look this way, like to me, it was just the route to get there. It was almost like a very out of body experience because I didn't care much about the health or anything else. I solely cared about aesthetics. And so like, even in saying that, and I guess I've never really thought about it, like even eating the 4,000 calories initially was not healthy because I still didn't have balance, right? I just had a new plan to get me there that was more healthy than what I was currently doing. But from a mindset perspective, it was still shit.
Yeah, definitely. I can agree more. What are the steps from that point then to now then? I know it's a lot of years to try and cover, but
I think that like the biggest ones were like learning where does everything fit in, like, because it's one thing to trust 4,000 clean calories. It's another thing to trust like cheat meals, like pizza and alcohol and like things like that, right? Date nights. And so when I went away to college, I vividly remember going out drinking with my friends and just being scared shitless of what I was going to look like the next day. And like instantly being ready to go to the gym. And all my friends are like hungover and I'm like, motherfuckers, get up. Like, let's go work out, and so I had like, I would drink a couple nights. I would wake up in the morning. I wouldn't look any worse. I'd be like, cool, alcohol is not going to kill me. Right. The same with like, pizza. Like I remember the first time I had pizza, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to wake up tomorrow. I'm going to be fat. And I had to wake up the next day, look in the mirror. I wasn't fat, but it was like, I had to trust that. And so I think that like the life experience has taught me, to trust a lot of things. You're probably more of an expert on mindset than I am, but I know a lot of people that have had eating disorders, myself included. I'm not sure you ever completely overcome the mindset. I think you learn to channel it better. When you look at like the classical terminology for an anorexic, right? Like anorexia nervosa, it's a nervous system disorder. And it's not, I don't think you ever fully beat like the mental side. I think that you definitely learn to channel it more positively. You definitely learn to comprehend it more. And I think comprehension drives proper action. But it's yeah, I mean, that's kind of what's like bridge. That's like the big like overhaul. I wouldn't say there's been a ton more that's important.
Is there anything that you would tell yourself from your current position? If you could tell yourself a bit of advice back then, what would it be?
No, like I would do the exact same thing I do with like anorexic clients. I would lay out the steps and create trust, like, and I would take it slowly. Um, it's learning to trust one variable at a time is how I've helped so many people overcome it. Back then, I don't know, like I said, I still don't know why I put so much trust in like one statement. And, if you think about it, right, like the things I was so afraid of, I remember holding it as a trophy that I ate an egg, like a yolk and a white. I remember being like, I ate a whole egg. And like now I think I'm like, Jesus, how fucking stupid did I sound? But like when I was 18, that was a big deal. And, so if I was working with somebody that was saying that, I would say, yeah, like, let's put an egg in your diet today. And then I would show them over the next 2 to 3 days, like, hey, look, you still look the exact same, right? Eggs are okay. And like, you just have to slowly learn that it's building trust, right? Because essentially you've lost trust with food.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly, I've never looked at it like that. I've been one of these people that's kind of typically been very, probably alpha with the way I eat things. Actually, It's just like anything I can eat, I eat.
Sure.
So I've never really thought about it like that. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I think every person has a trigger that caused them to go down that rabbit hole, and that's something I would love to like investigate more and like hear more from. It's a very sensitive subject when I work with an anorexic because I'm actually actively helping them out of it. I would love to talk with more or hear from more, and perhaps you can do this in future episodes with people that have had eating disorders. Like what was the trigger point that they think sent them into that? Because I can vividly identify mine. And I would really love to know, like, do they think they were born that way? And obviously I think that we're born with some genetic predisposition to it. But there's something that actively sent you there.
Do you remember your trigger point? No, you said you did.
100%, dude. So I was an athlete growing up. I played soccer my whole life. I was good at soccer. I picked up golf in high school. I happened to be really good at golf. And I remember I got hurt after my senior year of high school, and I was supposed to I was a very highly ranked golfer. Like I was supposed to go turn pro and, do all that stuff. And, so while I was injured, I went to a local college near my house and I lived at home. And one of the nights I went out with some of my friends to a high school football game, and it was a Friday night, and I had just started rehabbing my shoulder. So I'd been in the gym, and, this guy is one of my friend's fathers says to me, hey man, like you look great. Like I can tell you've been in the gym. And he said, yeah, you were a little pudgy before. And like, I had never, ever thought of myself. Like I never even questioned what I looked like. Like I was the kid in high school because I was so good at golf and I gave zero fucks about anything else. Like I left high school. I went to like KFC, Taco Bell, like went to work, had like 3 sodas on the way home, like had cheeseburgers and milkshakes. Like, and I wasn't fat, right? Like, yeah, I look back, maybe, I still, now that I like look back, I don't even think it was that accurate. Like, I think maybe I had some baby fat, but I don't think I was pudgy by any means. But it like fucking triggered an insecurity in me so quickly. And I was like, wow, like, well, whatever I'm doing in the gym is working. So some is good, more is better. And so I instantly started doing a hell of a lot more.
Yeah. So in the anorexia, there must have been consistent actions that kept you there. And, and triggers behind those as well.
Yeah.
Do you remember those?
Yeah, it was, so anybody that's tried to get really, really lean before, they know if you don't eat adequately, like your body will hold on to like that last little bit of fat. For me, like where I was predisposed to holding on to that last little bit of fat was my lower abs. And so I'd look in the mirror every day and my abs weren't perfectly shredded. And I'm like, Jesus, I'm fucking fat because that little bit of fat was there, right? Like that was like what I equated me being fat to, was having that. And I even remember getting body fat tests done at the gym, and the trainers were like, you're shredded, right? Like, and I honestly wish I had like a picture of myself, like lean, like shirtless and like in like shorts from back then, because I don't, to see what I looked like and how lean I really was. But yeah, like that was the trigger that kept me going every single day. And I would read every magazine I could get my hands on, and and that was really the problem, was the media. Like I would read, don't eat this, don't eat that, do this, do that, but it never said what you should eat, and it never gave like a realistic approach that is lifestyle balanced. It was, most of the articles that are written pre-summer are like aggressive 6-week shreds that are hyper aggressive and basically assume that you've been doing nothing and eating shit.
So is a comparative thing then, like you're looking at what everyone else is doing, or is that me speaking out of place?
I mean, I think that like, I don't think I was trying to look at what everybody else was doing. I was trying to learn, right? Like, cause remember I was an athlete, but my idea of protein was chicken fingers, right? Like, I actually remember my mom telling me that one time, like, that's the kind of family I come from, is, we don't eat healthy, like my mom, just recently I was at home, and bless my mom, like she told me she was making my dad fish for dinner, and then I get to dinner and it's like breaded. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, she's like, yeah, but it's gluten-free. And I'm like, Mom, come on. So, like that's the family I come from. So I didn't really know like what was proper, and I was doing my best to like read all these things and comprehend them and somehow make sense of it all, because I was really like on my own. Like I didn't have, none of my friends at the time cared, right? Like we were 18 years old, and fitness in 2002 at 18 wasn't as cool as fitness today in 2017 at 18 is. I think 18-year-olds today are much more aware than we were in 2002.
Yeah, definitely. Did you have, like, when you're going through the anorexia, did you have like a vision of where you want to be? Was it clearly defined, or was it a vague idea, or like what?
It was cover model physique.
Okay, so you knew exactly what you wanted to look like.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, do you reckon that? Well, obviously, because having some sort of vision of success is paramount to achieving it.
Yes, agreed.
But that took you further away, would you argue?
Yeah, because I yes and no. Okay. Like, I don't think it drove me away in and of itself. I think it drove me away because I didn't know how. And I think that the fact that I was getting the wrong information from the media drove me further away. But I don't think it changed my action. Like, I think that, like, had I actually come across like a protocol that was like, hey, this is how you do it, I would have been 100% compliant and I would have gotten there. I just, by proxy, I had a really negative body image, and did everything I could and didn't have anybody helping me.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Do you, like, on the same sort of tangent, do you go through a particular goal setting practice with your current clients?
I do. So there's a question in my questionnaire at the end, and it says, please describe your goals in detail. And it's a very simple statement, but the way you respond to it tells me a lot about you. And I'll get some clients that will write me a page on that question alone, and I'll get some clients that write 5 words. And if you write 5 words, I know you're really not committed to your goals and you really don't know them. And typically we'll actually start our conversation with you going a little deeper there. If you write me a page, I know that you're ready to do this. And, so I think there's definitely some psychology behind what I'm trying to learn about you. Your nutrition's not rocket science. I definitely like to think I'm more educated than most when it comes to it, just because I've been doing it for 13 years. But the ability to implement nutrition is very difficult, and that's where having a coach and like a real expert in your corner matters. And that's where I think that I've been able to have a level of success that no one in the industry can touch.
So what are the things that make success more likely?
Understanding why you're doing it, understanding, one of the exercises that I was so dumbfounded by that so many people don't do is they're not really willing to do like a lifestyle assessment and figure out what things they're willing to change and what they're not. One of the first things I ask clients is, what their non-negotiables are. Like one of my coaches that works for me now, she started as a client. And when her and her husband started as a client, they said, we're having date night every Friday. Like, It's non-negotiable. So I could have either taken them on as clients and build in a date night into their plan, or not have their business at all. Right? Like it was pretty simple. So I think a lot of people don't really know what they're willing to change. And if, you know, anybody that's listening to this, if you really think that you're willing to make a complete life overhaul tomorrow, you're not. Like, you're crazy. And so you need to start taking the steps towards changing things in your life instead of overhauling your life. And that's a much faster road to success.
Okay. So it's looking at the smallest possible change to begin with, or is it looking at the most effective change?
The most effective.
Okay.
Because as you know, right, you know, success builds momentum as well. Yeah. And so I think if you can establish one thing, and, you know, I'm big on like this one thing philosophy. Like that's my words, right? Like everything in my life, it's one thing. Like, what's one thing I can do right now to move forward? What's one thing I can change? And then I really try to keep it that simple. I'm very, very singularly focused at all times. You know, if somebody says like, what's one thing that I can change in my life right now that's going to give me a benefit, and you actually see the results from that one change, then you're likely to make a secondary change and a third change, right? And when you compound all of those together, now you've created this high level of success.
Okay. Are there any commonalities you see between the people that are successful in their transformation and people that aren't?
Balance is number one, right? Like, people that are we talking like immediate transformation or like sustained?
Sustained.
Yeah. Balance for sure, right? Anybody could do something for 6 weeks at a time. And like paleo is the perfect example, right? You get so many people that are like, oh, I tried paleo, it was great, but then I fell off because it wasn't sustainable. Well, if it's not sustainable and you had success, did you really have success? Yeah. Right? Or did you actually go backwards? Because now, like, you hate this whole style of eating, right? And so I would actually argue that like you created something even worse.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. How does, like, something I always think about is the way that a high performing athlete, because obviously you're working with a lot of, definitely in the CrossFit kind of regional slash games level at the moment.
Yeah.
How does a athlete's approach to, or a games athlete's approach to nutrition compare to the average person's?
It's still very relative to the individual. I'll give you two perfect examples. Like Travis Mayer, if you try to get him to be like super diligent all the time, like you're just asking for non-compliance, because it's just not, he doesn't care enough all year to do that. Carleen Matthews, like, will hit every number to the gram and will never fucking miss, regardless of the situation. Like, you could put her on like a stranded like desert island and she'll find a way to hit her macros. Like, she's single-handedly the most diligent person I've ever met. But it's still understanding that psychology and understanding what you need to get out of them. I mean, if you're asking like the difference between their nutrition plan and like an average person, clearly the fuel and recovery demands are exponentially higher. So the carbohydrate intake is exponentially higher. You know, I'm 2 years deep to working with super high level athletes, and I'm starting to get some data points around what it takes fuel wise to be at that level. We're seeing male athletes having the ability to be able to consume a minimum of 500 grams of carbs a day. And we're seeing females around 400 grams of carbs a day. So if you're thinking, you know, that you want to be a regionals level athlete, like, those are numbers that you should be building metabolic capacity to sustain, right? And not make you fat, and not make you sluggish. And that's not an overnight fix. Like, that doesn't just mean if you're a guy, hey, go pound 500 grams of carbs, because it might make you worse initially. You have to actually structure your diet properly to get you there.
Okay. So is that one of the things that athletes find hard in transitioning their nutrition?
I think a lot of athletes, you'd be surprised how many athletes undereat.
Yeah.
And I think that 90% of people in general that come to me undereat, but 90% of athletes undereat as well. And so they come to me and they're so singularly focused on like training, right? Like, oh, I did 4 sessions today, but did you recover from 4 sessions? And did you fuel tomorrow's 4 sessions, right? Because that's all I care about. Like, what you're doing in the gym, like, that's between you and your coach. But my job is to make sure that you can get the adaptive response that you're imposing in the gym, right? Because you don't go to the gym to get better. Like, you go to the gym to impose a stressor and for your body to create an adaptive response. And so if you're trying to get stronger, right, you're progressively overloading, so your body's adaptive response is becoming stronger. You're trying to hypertrophy, you're progressively overloading muscle, so you hypertrophy. If you're trying to build more aerobic capacity, you're challenging your aerobic system more. But it's always in an effort to create an adaptive response. But if you don't have a recovery stimulus, you're not creating that adaptive response. And oftentimes you're getting worse.
Okay. Something that's just come to mind is when you're talking about someone who is, you mentioned before about some people are very diligent and some people can't struggle with being that diligent the whole time.
Sure.
Is it a trial and error thing? Do you just see what people can do? Or are there triggers that you think, oh, this type of person, they would?
No, I always start with the best of intentions, assuming that they're going to be diligent. Because that's what we want, right? Like, and if they're not diligent, I want to try to help build diligence. But you start to understand somebody's personality pretty quickly, or you should, right? I mean, my model is heavily predicated on conversation with athletes and frequent touching with my athletes. So I really learn my athletes' personalities very quickly. I think that, like, anyone out there that's listening, and that if you're looking into a coach, like, you definitely should gauge how much access you have to that coach, because if they don't know your personality, and then they're not really able to accurately prescribe nutrition for you.
Nice. Or anything I should.
I mean, anything at all, really, right? And yeah, I mean, even fitness. I mean, I remember Charles Poliquin had like a model where he would give people personality tests to decide how he would build their programs. Yeah. Poliquin's a little bit of a nut, but I think that, like, there's a lot of validity to that.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any resources that particularly influenced your approach on, like, personality typing or anything like that?
No. Like, and if you asked me to, like, personality type, I wouldn't be able to tell you the first thing about it. But, like, having worked for 13 years with people, I know what makes people tick, right? And so that's the thing. Like, I don't claim to have a psychology background. I don't. Like, I took one psychology class in college. Like, I know the parts of the brain, right? But I don't have the background. I just have people skills. Like, I'm very good with people. I like people. I think it maybe just comes down to, like, my fundamental thing that, like, I like people. I want to see people succeed. Like, anybody that knows me knows that, like, I when I leave this earth, I just want people to be like, yeah, Jason made other people's lives better. And, my gift is definitely in nutrition. But I mean, fuck, like, if I'm coming up an elevator and I can carry your bag for you, like, cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just one thing, man. Like, do the right thing all the time.
Yeah.
So, and that's what's built my, like, ability to look into personalities. Like, I definitely don't have the classical backing.
Is there anything that you think people massively underestimate about nutrition or anything in your world at the moment? Yeah, I think, like, a lot of people underestimate self-awareness. Like, so I think a lot of people are out there looking for a solution that doesn't even exist. And I think a lot of people they think they can become someone else in this nutritional plan. And maybe they're even attempting to become someone else. Whereas, like, live in your own habits. Like, if your habit is that you have to eat out every Friday, then why are you changing that? Why are you making yourself miserable when there's absolutely a plan that can be built that allows for that? I think that being self-aware, in my opinion, is the key to everything in life, right? Like, Gary Vaynerchuk is like, if I could sell one thing in the world, I would sell self-awareness. And I completely agree with him on that. I think that so many people just don't know who they are. They don't know what habits they truly need to live in versus want to live in. And I think that, like, when you really start to know yourself better that way, because I've seen nutrition become very liberating for people too, right? Where, like, they used to succumb to social pressures and they learn that, like, hey, I don't need to be sitting at a table with 10 people to validate who I am as myself, right? I'm very comfortable eating my own thing while you guys eat your thing, and we're still friends, and things are super cool. And that's liberating for an individual that previously didn't have self-awareness and subsequently self-confidence. So I would say self-awareness is necessary, but it's also a potential outcome. Yeah, definitely. I like to say, I've got mindset models for this kind of stuff, and it's just perspective. I think it's once people get perspective over their life and the situation and themselves, it makes transition a lot easier.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you always want to talk about in podcasts, but you never get asked?
I don't think so. I mean, I think people usually touch on like, I think that like the one thing I want the world to know is like what a real coach is all about, like, and what like a proper coaching relationship should look like. You know, I think that my world, like the nutrition world, is so fucking bastardized right now. And I can tell you there's no template in the world that's going to work for everybody. There's like, you should have access to your coach. You shouldn't feel like a dick for wanting to text your coach, right? Like, I wish the world understood those things more, because of how powerful they can be for all the reasons we just got done talking about. But that's just me like ranting about that versus being asked about it. So
you're saying I can't just spend $20 on a program from online. It's not going to be perfect for me.
I think there's templates being sold for like $100. Like if you want to spend $100, like,
sign me up.
But like, so here's my rant on that. And like for everyone that doesn't understand why I hate it so much, like this is, if you think about it logically, and I like logic, like I'm a math person, right? So I'm very like, it's so funny, dude. I was on the plane this morning and I was thinking about this time, and I don't know why this shit happens, but like in like 8th grade when we had this writing assignment where like you had to think like if you could have one thing in the world, like what would it be? And you had to like vividly describe it. And I'm such like a here and now and like factual person. Like I remember there was like this bike that I like really wanted. Like I was really big into like BMX bikes, and like that's like what I wrote about. And like I thought about like how fucking stupid is that? But like all my friends were like, oh, I wrote about I would have this tropical island, and this other dude's like, I wrote like I would be like some broccoli man, and like people wrote about like the most creative shit, and here I was like, man, I want a bike, right? So like I'm super factual, but when you look at like a templated approach from a factual basis, right? Like let's put 30 people in a room, and let's call it a weight loss template. If I'm writing a weight loss template, it has to serve all 30 people. I'm taking the person with the worst metabolism and that's going to need the lowest amount of calories, and I'm writing it for them, right? Because by nature, that puts all 29 other people in a caloric deficit, right? So all those other 29 people are now living in a much larger deficit than they need to be in, are feeling exponentially worse, and are at exponentially higher risk from becoming metabolically adapted. And then you wonder why we're seeing all fucking metabolic adaptation. Yeah. Like, it's fucking stupid, right? But like, that's what people are like, well, it's only $75, so, you know, whatever. Like, exactly. Cool, pay $75 to them, and then you're going to have to hire a coach that can actually change metabolic adaptation. So, which, you know, again, like that makes me sound like a jerk, but it's, you know, it just, I think that I have this conversation with my team all the time, and it's like, we're so blessed to be able to do what we do. And we genuinely love serving people, and you know, it just becomes frustrating at times to fix so much damage, because it's like, man, like you give me a healthy individual and I can make results happen very quickly. But you know, 90% of the people that come to us, they are broken, and that's okay. That's just the state of the world. And I genuinely hope that the knowledge continues at the rate of progression that it is, so that we don't see a broken culture 10 years from now. You know, I think we're seeing today's culture, you know, the culture we live in today is a reflection of 10 years ago. And the culture that we live in 10 years from now is a reflection of what's happening today. Generations are always going to be around that number of years behind. And so if you think about it, 10 years ago is when paleo got super popular, right? Like 2007, first CrossFit games. Mm-hmm. That's when paleo was really getting its big introduction. And what happened was, you know, you got an autoimmune based diet, right? Which is fantastic for autoimmune crowds. And we're applying it to this extreme performance sport. And now you see what happens, right? We've got metabolic issues. We've got more autoimmune issues. We've got hormone issues. And so I think that the education that's being implemented today, our culture 10 years now, I mean, the athleticism of some people in 10 years is going to be scary.
Yeah, it's going to be incredible.
So, and the level of health, I think, will be exponentially higher.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it's exactly as we were kind of saying before, the pendulum swing It's got to kind of sit around the middle, because it definitely swung a long way away from health at one point.
And the fucked up part is, it was meant like the reason it swung so far from health was a result of people trying to achieve health, right?
Yes, yeah.
And that's like the really like ironic part of it all, is it's like, well, there's this really healthy diet out there, let's do it. But it was so myopic in its singular view, right? Like it was so like food quality, great. And then it forgot all about recovery and performance and fuel, right? But fuck, man, like you're getting all your vitamins and minerals, cool, but you're not getting the necessary calories or carbohydrates to recover. And oh yeah, like we live in this central nervous system dominant sport, but fuck the recovery on the CNS side. Like it's mind-boggling, like when we say that, right? But maybe it's just because we're 10 years later and we have awareness now. I mean, at the moment, nobody had the awareness to talk about it.
Exactly. Something I completely forgot to bring up was the idea, you mentioned the phrase nutritional counseling on your website. Sorry, can you go into
coaching?
So I saw counseling on there. Sorry, that's my bad. Can you go into a bit more about what that kind of means?
Yeah, so like it's almost like we just got done talking about. I don't think that the numbers are the hard part. It's the implementation. Okay. I could give anybody, like my parents. I can give my parents a set of numbers. They're not going to do it. And so what I have to work with them to do, I'll give you the best example. I work with a guy in Colorado right now. He started with me. He was able to hit his numbers. Life got super stressful for him. He couldn't hit his numbers to save his life. Like he had work stress. He had family stress. He had physical stress. He got injured, right? Now, literally, our plan is this, and I'll share his plan for the whole world. He has to have breakfast by 8:30 a.m. It has to be a combination of a protein and a fat. He has to have lunch by 12:30 p.m. It has to be a combination of a protein and a fat. He has to have a snack by 3 p.m. and it has to have a protein source. That's his whole plan, right? And it sounds so simple, but because of where he's at, it's built such momentum that I promise you within another 4 weeks, we're back to using numbers.
Nice.
Right? But that's coaching. Like, what if like 6 weeks ago when we started this plan, I'd have been like, dudes, like you suck shit, get back on your numbers. He'd have been like, fuck off, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right? And he wouldn't be getting the help he needs. Like, that's coaching. That's understanding an individual. It's understanding what's holding them back. That's understanding the actual implementation of helping people. And numbers don't help people. Food doesn't help people. Like, coaches help people. And, education is always going to drive compliance. So if you understand what you're doing and if your coach can accurately articulate to you what you're doing, then you're going to be successful, or you're going to be more successful than you could have been. And so I just think that's such a missing link. I think it's so essential. And my certification that's coming out this year, I'm not certifying people to become nutritionists. I'm certifying people to become nutrition coaches.
Yes. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And you really hit the nail on the head there with a lot of what I believe. So that's really, really cool.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. Is there, I always love this question. I throw it in just to see what happens.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you believe that others find controversial?
Probably everything I do is controversial, man. Like, I feel like people always want to take shots. I think that people will be most shocked because the one question I always get is, what's your approach? And my approach is I don't have one. Mm-hmm. Like, my approach is get to know the individual, figure out what makes them tick, and start making changes. So I'm not like a low carb guy, high carb guy, carb cycling, keto. Like I think they're all tools in a toolbox. I think they should be used in the appropriate situation. But I don't think I do anything overly controversial. I think that I really want individuals to understand what they want. And the best example of that is, like, unfortunately, I don't want to get gender specific and have all the women in the world hate me for this, but like women that come into the sport of CrossFit initially say, well, I want to look good and I want to get stronger. And so they want to perform at the level of Katrin David's daughter, but they want to look like Katrin David's daughter and like understand that she's like the 1% of the 1%, right? And 90% of women that need to be better at the sport probably need to gain a little bit of body fat. And they don't like to hear that. And that's okay, right? And this is where nutritional periodization comes into play and why I built the whole concept of nutritional periodization, and why we're seeing so much success with our athletes with it. But I think that I am always going to tell you what you need to hear. And, I think more athletes need to understand what they need versus what they want. Like, if you want to look good, like, off season is the time to look good, right? When you're working strength and skill acquisition, in my periodization phase, like off season is strength and skill acquisition, that's when you could potentially live in a calorie deficit. But if you think you're going to dominate the open and you're going to do 5 intensive workouts every week and you're going to smash your CNS, right, shift from a training stimulus to a competition stimulus and adequately recover in a calorie deficit, like, you're fucking nuts.
Yeah.
So
I don't think that's controversial. I think that's just common sense.
That's controversial, but I think that it's like more people need to know it.
Yes, 100%. It's it's underrated, I think.
Well, and 17.3 is the best example because everybody, like 98% of the people in the world, and I hope that people are watching the live stream right now, but 98% of the people are up in weight today because of 17.3. And if you think about it logically, right, you just went through 2 weeks where there was no heavy weights involved, right? Those dumbbells weren't heavy. So a lot of body weight movements. Well, a lot of people are repeating the workout. So if you look at most people's structure, it's Thursday's a light day, Friday's competition day, Saturday's active recovery, Sunday's relatively off, Monday's competition day, Tuesday's potentially training, right? Wednesday is like recovery, movement, Thursday, active recovery, repeat the cycle, right? Where in there are you doing anything near 1 rep max or high volume? Like, you're not. Now all of a sudden we go through potentially 2-3 weeks like that, and we hit this week where all the barbells are fucking heavy, right? Everybody's getting close to their 1 rep max because whatever your stopping point is, it's close to your respective 1 rep max, and you're taking several attempts there. The central nervous system is getting fucking hammered, not to mention physically you're under more load than you've been under in 2 to 3 weeks. Like, hello inflammation, hello central nervous system stress, hello scale weight gain. So everyone's figuring out, oh my God, I gained 2 pounds. Yeah, no shit you did. Like, accept that shit. You're supposed to. Like, you should be a little heavier right now. That means your body's responding. It means it's creating an inflammatory response, which is, the foundation of recovery.
Boom.
So,
yeah, you should just drop your mic.
I think more people need to know that, though. Like, it's it's just so no one's talking about that, right? And that to me is baffling because we know as right on your end the mindset, on my end the nutrition, we know people are watching the scale number. Like, we know it, whether we want them to or not. Like, it's happening, and we have to be able to explain what's going on. And everybody that I talk to that understands that concept, they're cool with it, right? And that's why I think I'm very fortunate. My clientele is awesome. Like, they get it, right? And maybe it's just because I've explained it to them. Like, they're like, hey, totally cool, it happens. But I wrote it, like, when I put my Facebook, like, the tips on Friday for nutrition, I actually wrote that piece in there because I saw this coming. And I know it had to resonate with a ton of people.
Yeah, exactly. I can't let you get away without asking whether there's any books that have changed your life or any that you've gifted more than anyone else.
I've gifted Ask Gary V book to anybody that wants one. In fact, and I know you have like a big European following, so I'm gonna caveat this one.
Yeah.
Any of your US followers that want one, if you send me a message, I will send it to you because I think I still have a couple hundred copies.
Nice.
So I did. I had dinner with Gary and Andy Frisella last year, and so I got like 250 copies.
Nice.
But Gary Vaynerchuk has been like the single biggest influential person in my life in terms of like a role model. And I really believe if you look deeply into what he says, everybody can be successful in their own endeavors. So that's probably the one book that I've gifted. I think what people would be surprised to know about me is I don't read at all. I do listen to audiobooks at times. But I generate a lot of my philosophies on watching human interaction and understanding human interaction. Yeah. So I like to stay up to date on what's current. I like to listen to other people's podcasts. I like to hear people's points of view on things. I like to hear people's explanations on things. And then I like to live in research. Like I like to implement, watch what happens and react. And so like, I know that's very that's very contrarian to like every success guru out there. Like, read this book, read that book. But I'm a podcast guy. So if you're asking podcasts, like Lewis Howes, I think is great. Joe Rogan, I like for entertainment value. Although I think there's some education if you really go deep into it.
Definitely.
I think Aubrey Marcus is a very intelligent individual. Let's see, who else do I listen to? Tim Ferriss is an influence. I'd be remiss to not say, like, Brian Grasso and Carrie. I won't say that I watch all of their content because I get to work so closely with them, but they're massively influential in my life. Who else? John Romanello is very influential in my life. He helps me a lot. We talk weekly. So nice. Yeah, that's probably where I go for my stuff. What about you? Where do you go for that?
Podcasts.
It's an interview on me, but I want
No, go for it. I love to talk about podcasts. In fact, I cut down a lot of the podcasts I was listening to, purely on the focus that I had my headphones in and I wasn't appreciating where I was and I wasn't present for a lot of the time. I was commuting, whether to see clients or to go back home or whatever, and I wouldn't actually be present. I'd be spending most of my company in Joe Rogan's presence or something like that. But the ones that I think the ones that I've kept, which is probably the more interesting thing, is Tim Ferriss' podcast, because it's so eclectic and to the point. And Joe Rogan's, because again, it's eclectic. And I think there's a lot of knowledge in there.
There really is.
I generally get rid of most of the comedians that he has on because it's just 3 hours of smashed people.
But every now and then, right? Like, if I'm bored on a flight, it's great.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this: like, when do you consume most of your content? Like, and so this is a question I'm always fascinated, like, by other high level achievers, because I know what my day looks like, right? And my day today started at 3:30 a.m. like wake up call. I was on a flight at 5:10, right? And so I find most of the content I consume is when I'm flying, because it's really the only downtime I have. So like a typical day for me is I'm up by 6, I'm writing to my list early, I'm creating content in the morning, I'm on phone calls by 9, I'm talking till 5, I'm training till 7, I'm creating more content, and then I'm going to sleep. So I don't really have time to consume content during the day.
So my day is very different. I get up at the same time as my girlfriend, which is typically fairly late, like 6:30. I'll kind of potter around for a bit, and kind of I find that I work best and perform best when I've got a lot of space in my day. So I try not to cram, and I've gone through the whole work. Not the twerk, but just the work. And I find that I don't perform well when I just back to back. So I have to put space in my day. So it'll be a case of I'll consume my content when I'm traveling, typically, or I'll try and spend 45 minutes to an hour a day in the morning, first thing, just kind of filling my brain with stuff that I should be thinking about. So whether that's books or going through Brian Carey stuff at the moment and all that kind of stuff, it just
awesome.
I try and put it in a block like that and kind of get it all in there, because otherwise I don't make time for it. And
so I think everybody has to have, and you're like the mindset person, so I'd love your opinion on this. I think everybody has to have some facet of that in their life for success. And I'll explain, meaning I don't have time for that in my day right now, right? Like I work, and Craig Ballantyne would kill me for this, right? But I probably work 14 to 16 hours a day, truthfully. I don't have time to consume an hour of content in the morning. I'll take that back. I choose to sleep enough so I don't have that. I could wake up an hour earlier and do it, but I wouldn't be getting adequate sleep, right? There's always a way. But I don't really have that hour in my day. So what I found is Mark Fit turned me on to the 5-minute journal. And literally it's 5 minutes every morning. And I write out like my 3 affirmations for the day, my goals for the day, what I'm thankful for that day. And that has single-handedly changed my mindset in the last month. And even though it's not consuming content for an hour, it is becoming very clear on the small things I need to do that day and the small things I'm thankful for that day.
Exactly, because it realigns you with your perspective.
Yeah.
And it gives you your direction, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember why I'm here, rather than just going straight from one thing into the other. And that's why I cultivate that space.
And I think it like lives closely to my one thing philosophy, right?
Yes.
Like it only asks for like, it asks like, what 3 things am I going to do today? But it narrows your focus, because I think we all tend to live in like this big macro perspective, right? Like, well, the people that want to be rich, like I want to make $1 million. Okay, cool. Like what's the first thing you're going to fucking do? Because until you do that one thing, like none of the other 100 things that you need to do matter.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to recommend you a book, despite the fact that you're not going to read it.
Maybe I'll download it.
Yeah,
I'll download it, and I've got a flight on Sunday. So
yeah, Essentialism. Have you read that by Greg McKeown? Yeah, I think there's one question in there that I think about quite a lot, and it's which one thing could I do now that's going to make everything else either obsolete or easier? Yeah. And that's how I construct my day, around that one thing. And it, like you said, it makes the huge difference.
What are your thoughts on Gary Vaynerchuk's question of how can I put myself out of business?
Oh, I honestly, I don't follow much of Gary's stuff. It doesn't. No? I went through a phase of being very interested with him, and it actually took me away from where I wanted to be. And I think that's because, like I've already mentioned, I work very well in spaced out kind of.
He's anything but.
Yeah. He's work 18 to 20 hours a day and just don't stop. And it hit a point when he was talking about how much time he spends with his kids. And if he had a dual version of himself, he would send the dual version of himself to spend time with family. And then he would carry on working. And I was like, well, I thought the influences that I want in my life, I want them to be the people that are most aligned with what I want to do. So
it's really interesting you bring that up, right? And I think people need to understand when they're consciously saying something, what they're subconsciously saying as well. Mm-hmm. And I have this conversation with my clients a lot. Yeah. And in life, it's very simple, right? Like Gary Vaynerchuk, when he's actively saying, I'm choosing to work 20 hours a day, he's also saying, albeit passively, I'm choosing to not spend time with my family. Yeah. Right? And I think that in my world, so I get people that are like, well, I want to have this cake, right? Okay, cool. Like, I don't judge you for it. But understand that like when you're saying you're actively choosing to deviate from the plan, you're also saying, maybe not actively, but passively, that you don't care about your results, right? And nobody really goes there in their thoughts. They're like, oh, I didn't think about that. Like, just because you're actively saying you want this doesn't mean that you're not saying you don't care about your results, because that is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And I think people need to be really aware of what all of their actions mean, like 360 degrees, not just in their line of thinking.
Yeah, and again, it just comes down to that perspective. It's watching yourself. It's becoming the watcher, becoming the listener of your own thoughts, your own actions, your own beliefs, essentially. Yeah. And because that is the thing that's going to inevitably direct your outcome is your beliefs. So you hit the nail on the head. Yeah,
no, it's cool. I think that's good.
Yeah,
it's really neat. Like it's two very different perspectives on the same thing, which I like.
Yeah. It's the principles again. It's the principles that make things work. Always. Right, man. That's an awesome place to end, I think. But we haven't done. Where can people find a bit more about you? You're all over the internet, but
the best places to get to me. So my website is jasonphillipsnutrition.com. Phillips with 2 L's. Let's see. I also own a supplement company, Mission 6 Nutrition. So MISSION, the number 6 nutrition.com. And then social media on Instagram, ironically, I'm Jason Phillips Fitness, not Jason Phillips Nutrition. And then obviously on Facebook, it's just my name. You can find me, friend request me. I'll say this, and I always try to say this at the end of podcasts, like reach out to me, like send me an email, send me a message on Facebook, send me a DM on Instagram. I run all of my accounts. Like, I love interacting with people, man. Like I am here today because of people, and I will never lose sight of that. So if there's anyone out there that my story resonated, or if you just want to talk and you need help, like do it. Like, please, I'm begging you, because it makes my day as well.
Well, I've really enjoyed this. Chat.
No, my pleasure, man. Thank you. I've enjoyed it as well.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Alpha Movie Podcast, and I'm sure you agreed this was a great episode with Mr. Jason Phillips. And you must be aware by now, because I've been going on about it for weeks, that this is another episode of the Mindset Rx'd series, and this is going to be turned into what's going to become the ultimate guide for CrossFit athletes on their mindset. There's snippets of what's going to be available if you head to Amazon and search for the impossible art of consistency or intensity tolerance. Sometimes that fails, so if you search for my name, Tom Foxley, Foxley, you shall find it on Amazon. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and if you enjoyed the show, please don't be scared to reach out to either Jason or I and show us some love, because we massively appreciate it. And just speaking for myself, I enjoy having my ego rubbed. So I'll see you soon for another episode of the Alpha Movement Podcast.